talk about what we've done this past year. From the moment the mayor stepped into this office, the well-being of youth and families has been a top priority. And so within the first month, she signed an executive order creating the Office of Youth and Families, whose goal is to coordinate the resources of the Youth Study Center, the New Orleans Public Library, and NORDC under one roof to create better outcomes for children and families. She had a great focus on the dire conditions at the Youth Study Center and improving those vital functions, making sure, first of all, that the facility was as safe as it could be for young people. But secondly, we've made improvements in staff morale, improvements in service offerings for young people, improvements in school attendance rates, improvements in the ways that we treat the mental health needs of young people. We've been taking a really trauma-informed approach. But beyond that, we have made an effort to advance the policing alternatives for youth ordinance, the pay ordinance, which provides alternatives to detention for young people. It is an ordinance that, when implemented, which we've been working hard and been able to do, allows police officers to issue warnings or summonses instead of taking young people to detention. And we've also put our money where our mouth is. We've secured over $100,000 that's gone to the Welcoming Project. We've made significant investments in Louisiana Center for Children's Rights, which is the Child Public Defender's Office. We've launched a summer jobs program for 100 youth who've been arrested 3 or more times in the last 18 months. And we've been trying to increase efficient outcomes by coordinating all the actors of the criminal justice system. Some of you might have seen on the mayor's Facebook and Twitter pages that a couple of weeks ago there was a convening of all members of the criminal justice system. The public defender, the district attorney, the sheriff, the juvenile court, the criminal court, our office, all in search of how we create better efficiencies through coordination so that we can create better outcomes for our people. And so the mayor's approach has been holistic on this. She believes that taking a public health approach plus community policing is what equals public safety. And so that's the direction that we are headed in moving forward. Our goal is to use the resources that we have, the agencies of city government, in a way that provides value for citizens through coordination, through family-centered services, and through community-oriented approaches. And so you might ask, how does that work? Well, it works by all of us working together. And so what you're going to hear today is the different ways in which the police, the Office of Criminal Justice Coordination, the Office of Youth and Families, and the Youth Study Center, in conjunction with the mayor's office, is all working together to row in the exact same boat. We believe that we can leverage police officers to do more than simply arrest people. They can be a part of the village that it takes to raise kids. And so we've been taking a community policing approach that is centered in building relationships and in creating community connections so that we're not just enforcing the law, but we're preventing crime from happening in the first place. So with that, I will leave it to the folks on this panel to more in depth explain exactly what it is they do. We'll go ahead and start with Chief Thomas.
Good morning. Deputy Chief John Thomas. I'm over the Investigation Services Bureau. Juvenile Bureau falls under that bureau, the Juvenile Detention Center. I was very excited about this. I am a big fan of kids. I love kids. I grew up in Nord, and I knew what Nord had done for me and how it kept me off the streets. Back when I was growing up, we didn't have a curfew. So we didn't have that issue, but we did have the Nord Park, and I was so excited when the mayor brought Nord back and it became more robust. And then I hooked up with Emily Wolf, Commissioner Stevens, and collectively with the Youth Study Center, we work hand in hand to ensure that we're doing an entire wraparound services for the juveniles. It's not just about putting juveniles in jail. It's about actually saving juveniles, preventing crime from happening on the front end. The mayor was very supportive in the juvenile curfew center, and the object is to get these kids off the street, put them in a safe environment. If they happen to be roaming the street, we want to take them, and we have been taking the majority of them back to their parents so that they could be safe inside of their homes. We don't want kids roaming the street to be not only potential perpetrators, but more importantly, not to be a victim of crime. Because we know anybody could be a victim of crime, especially if you have in the late hours. Me and Commissioner Stevens work closely together with all the initiatives. We're trying to do some initiatives where we get the juvenile counselors involved, where they actually interact not only with the kids, but also with the parents of the kids, and get them to come on board and give them assistance in what they need to help get these kids on the straight and narrow and get them moving in a forward direction. So not only that, we have Ms. Angela Wiggins, the Youth Opportunity Center. When we bring these kids into the curfew center or get the information, we actually relay that information to the Youth Opportunity Center so they can get some intervention. Because to bring a kid to the juvenile detention center and not do some type of intervention so that we can prevent them from coming back. And fortunately, with our curfews as it stands now, we haven't had any repeat offenders to come back to the curfew center. We know that we have the at the third offense, that the family could be summoned if they have 3 offenses, and I'm glad to report that we have no repeat offenders as it relates to that. Hardin Park was a park that was troubled in the area of the 5th District. The NORD people got together with Commander Frank Young of the 5th District, and we were able to put resources out there and patrol the district while those kids are actually practicing. We don't want to make a safe environment. I also was reached out by the Huntersville NORD representative, who also asked that we patrol in that area. I got with Commander Frank Young, and we patrol that area. We want to make sure that these kids safe morning, noon, and night, especially while they're out doing summer programs. And we continue to work to that end to make sure that our youth are safe, and actually working with the people on this panel here to actually help coordinate everything. We're in constant contact with Emily Wolf, Commissioner Stevens. We constantly brainstorming on what we could do better to make sure that we have a very robust program to keep our kids safe in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens.
Good morning. My office is responsible for carrying out the mission to facilitate and coordinate all criminal justice and juvenile justice programs. And what we have done is we have taken a holistic approach with the juvenile justice system, looking in ways to make it better for all of our children and all of our residents. We work very closely with the juvenile court judges as it relates to alternative to detention programs that they have in place through the court. And also we're looking to establish more alternative to detention programs throughout the city. So we're working very closely to get that up and running. Juvenile court does receive funding from the Louisiana Commission on Law Enforcement, which is funneled through our office. And those programs that they have established, your GROW program, which is a girls alternative program, pre-adjudicated program, and your MELLOW program, which is geared for young men who are coming through the system at the pre-adjudicated stages. And also they have recently initiated a teen court program, which is slated to start July 1. So my office is actually that office that facilitate and coordinate all of the criminal justice and juvenile justice initiatives through the city.
Thank you, Commissioner Stevens. Yeah.
Good morning. So the Office of Youth and Families is really the materialization of the mayor's public health approach and emphasis on taking a multi-generational approach to supporting youth and families. So in May of 2018, she signed an executive order creating our office. And what that did was that brought the New Orleans Recreation Development Commission, the Public Library System, and the Youth Study Center under one unified umbrella. The vision behind that was to make sure that we coordinated the approach that we take when we're supporting our families and their youth at all nexuses of the lifespan. So some of the work that we do is interdepartmental in terms of helping to ensure that a child-focused lens is used throughout City Hall and the various departments. Another stream of work that we do is making sure that we are connecting what is often disparate interests together. So an example of that is that Policing Alternatives for Youth initiative. We really worked to advance that effort to ensure that case management was a critical component of how we support youth who had been caught up in the system because of status offenses and other somewhat developmentally appropriate missteps. And the goal is always focused on prevention and deterring further involvement in the system. The other example of some work that we do is we really supported the initiation of an impact study on the Raise the Age legislation. The thinking behind that, increasing the age that youth are considered still minors and not subject to adult stipulations and criminal consequences, was to ensure that we were able to, one, take a data-driven approach at how we design the systems, the supports, and the messaging of what the impact of that policy would be. On the other side, it was also an effort to push our partners and other stakeholders throughout the juvenile justice system to be able to anticipate the changes that would come with that coming legislation, because often the best intervention is simply communication. Another example of the work stream that we've been doing in terms of capacity building, we were able to secure $100,000 to support reentry and rehabilitation services, and that's done primarily through different partners such as the Welcoming Project, which is a Travis Hill extension. Another example is our summer job program. So this year marked the pilot year for the Summer Success program, and what that program is it's a paid summer employment opportunity for formerly system-involved youth. So the criteria loosely that we established to reach out to youth who were at a critical point of either not having access to positive youth development, or also at a junction where they had been cyclical involvement in different systems and just hadn't seen the outcomes that they needed. So what we developed and partnered with the Gun Violence Reduction Task Force and Job One to give 100 youth who had been arrested 3 times in the last 18 months a paid summer job. The summer job was a lot more specialized than what is traditionally offered through the Job One NOLA Youth Works program. The way we specialized it was to partner with organizations who already support youth who are at risk or high risk. So some of those partners range from small business owners in the local community to other nonprofits who provide a multitude of services such as job readiness skills, life skills, their own form of case management, and also just true experiential opportunities for the kids to develop skills that they didn't have. The thinking behind that, using a summer employment opportunity as an alternative to consequences, is that when you talk about concentrated poverty and you talk about the inequities that show up in healthcare, in housing, in education, those things all contribute to poor and struggling life outcomes. So by giving kids skills, we really wanted to bring to fruition that notion that kids do well when they can. So if you take that approach and use a skills building approach, we firmly believe we'll be able to truly divert youth from further involvement in the juvenile justice system, and more than that, be able to engage the community as active partners in those youth's development. So with that being said, we also have connected those youth who had been in the juvenile justice system with NORD and the libraries. That looks like a multitude of access points. Some of that is libraries actually provided at the Youth Study Center. The other part of that is ensuring that they're registered and have cards so that they can take advantage of the great programs that NORD sites offer as well as the libraries. So we just encourage you to continue to look at this as an effort that we all take a stake in. Parents, the community, and city government to truly make our youth able to thrive. So thank you.
Thank you, Camille. Dr. Keyshawn Webster?
Yes, I'm Dr. Webster, and I am the director of the Youth Study Center. And the Youth Study Center is our city's detention facility, and it is one of the dispositions for youth who are system involved in juvenile court. We provide housing for young people at the Youth Study Center while they're going through their processing with the juvenile court system. One of the things that we were charged to do, me and my colleague Dr. Fournier, was to really look at current conditions at the Youth Study Center and really maximize the opportunity while we have young people in our custody. While detention is a part of the continuum of the juvenile justice system, we have a more expansive view of what opportunities presents itself while youth are detained. We know overall in our city there is a dearth of mental health services provided and available to young people and vulnerable youth. So we see the Youth Study Center under this administration really expanding those opportunities for youth while they're there. So our opportunity is an opportunity to transform lives through restoration, rehabilitation, and reentry. So that is an intervention approach that we're taking, and we've been aligning our staff and resources to provide a real deep dive into the lives of young people and really maximizing that opportunity while they're with us to really influence changes in behavior and criminogenic thinking. So with that being said, since we've been there, in addition to addressing issues with staff shortages, long stays of young people, we've also pushed on the system a bit with our daily population management to make sure that the system is working, that young people are moving. We've been able to bring down our average length of stay at the facility by actively doing population management. We have addressed some working conditions that have created persistent staff shortages at the Youth Study Center by making conditions safer not only for the youth but for staff. So addressing those conditions have increased the morale of staff, and when you take care of the caregivers, in turn those caregivers provide better care to those young people who are really in need of the direct services that we're providing at the Youth Study Center. In addition to that, we have really encouraged school attendance. So while young people are in our custody, we're making sure that they're still getting education. We partner with Travis Hill School, so it's a full-fledged school, and we have a 90% attendance rate. That did not exist prior to this administration. So really setting a priority that young people continue their education and not experience disruptions in that area is a high priority for the facility. We've also looked at a new behavioral management system. My colleague, Dr. Nancy Fournier, has worked closely at the facility as a consultant with me to institute a trauma-informed approach to how we deal with the work. And we've heard a lot about trauma-informed approaches. When we look at conditions, persistent conditions, and the social impact of growing up in New Orleans in this environment and post-Katrina experience of young people, we have to understand the trauma that they've experienced. And when we're able to align our social services to address young people and meet them where they are in terms of the trauma and operate from that premise, we're able to see better outcomes. So with that being said, we are piloting an initiative, which we are the first in the state, to bring a trauma-informed approach to the Juvenile Justice Detention Center. We have a colleague organization in Texas. That's the only other place in the country that's doing that. So we're really excited and proud of that. And I'm going to let Nancy talk a little bit more about that trauma-informed approach and how we see that rolling out over the next 3 years.
Good morning. We are partnering with Crossroad NOLA, which is a training organization here in New Orleans that has worked with trauma-informed care and training up to this point, people working in foster care and the child abuse system. But we see many of the youth that we serve also are the same child at a different point in the system. Basically, with trauma-informed care, our whole approach is to help the youth self-regulate when they are frustrated, when they have a short fuse. It just really takes into account a lack of arsenals of response for youth to have, which is partially why they get involved in criminal behavior and partially not. So we try to get our staff, and through our protocol of getting kids up, moving them through the day, getting them to school, having them meet with their attorneys, having them go to court, to take an approach that maintains public safety, but is a little bit less authoritative, so we don't get into continual conflicts with the youth that are there. And this is working because our assaults have gone down. I can't remember what the percentage point is, but it's over 50%. It has become a more therapeutic environment. We are the first people to try to do this in a juvenile justice setting. Most trauma-informed approaches are either in school settings or for younger kids. Our staff are undergoing training out in Texas, and then we're having the experts in Texas come and spend time with us to embed it in our facility to really change how we operate. It's really exciting, it's really cutting edge, and it will be a long-term process, but we see it by having staff get more engaged, and more engaged staff, as Dr. Webster said, is a better caretaker staff. Youth respond to structure and support, and so we provide structure and support for them to lower their acting out behaviors while they're in our care.
Yes, and one other piece that we are venturing out to do at the Youth Study Center is really focusing on reentry. So what happens to young people once they're released from the facility? And as my colleague said, oftentimes we see repeat offenders. So we have the revolving door of youth recidivism. So we are moving towards really focusing on those first 90 days that young people are released, and actually having some of our detention staff follow them home and provide intensive family support therapies, and also monitoring those young people, checking in with the families at least 3 times a week, visiting their schools, and having those checkpoints for the first 90 days, and making sure that all their needs are met so that we don't have them continue in this perpetual cycle of committing crimes. So we hope to be able to come to you and sometime soon to look at the impact of that on some of the youth recidivism and crime stats that we all are concerned about as a community.
Thank you, Dr. Webster and Ms. Fournier. Well, what I hope you've heard today is that the mayor's vision for investing in young people and families is broad. It begins with young people who aren't involved in the criminal justice system at all, through programming at our anchor facilities like libraries and Nord C centers. But it also goes up through situations where young people are detained. The goal is to invest in young people at every stage of that spectrum to ensure that not only are their lives as good as they can be, but that we're preventing future interactions with law enforcement and future victims in the community. And so, the approach is to be able to touch young people in a constructive way, to invest in them, and to reframe behavior or proclivities that might lead to behavior that we don't want to see in the city. So with that, I will open it up for questions.
Yeah, and obviously paying attention to how you guys at the camera are working. If we want to sort of take a beat when the media asks a question, if you want to wait a second to get your mics in order, I want to make sure that you get the sound that you need. So if we have to take a little bit of time to move things around as you're asking your question, just let us know and we'll let y'all do that.
For Dr. Webster or Ms. Fournier, the trauma-informed approach, when did that start? And did you say we are the only place in the country or one of the only that is doing that?
Let's hang for just a second, make sure they get it. That's okay.
The pause. Sorry.
That's all right.
Our formal kickoff was, I think, May 15th, though obviously when you're doing system change, there's a lot of pre-work that's been going on for months. We are the only place in Louisiana, and there's one other place in Texas. So we'll be number two in the nation. But it's more than just training. It's not a bunch of people just being trained in a room. It's really re-looking through every single one of our processes, our dietary program, how we handle visitation. We live with our youth. So it's everything from getting them up in the morning and getting them showered and eating and back into school to putting them to bed at night or having them go to bed at night. It is looking at every single aspect of where we touch them. And where as staff we touch one another. How we handle our own frustrations and need for control and things that parents deal with. We are really public safety parents is what we're doing.
Where did the idea come from? Is this a model? Did you model the Texas studies?
It's called trust-based relationship women. Trust-based relational intervention. It's from the Karen Purvis Institute. Crossroads NOLA has been training child welfare staff across the state for the last year and a half, and we have partnered with them. They are the experts in this model and the experts of taking something that is started in a very controlled therapeutic relationship and making it real in a 24-hour situation with urban kids, with adolescent kids. So part of why this is going to take a while is our staff is developing their own language and approach. So we're adapting something that was started for younger kids and making it work for an adolescent urban population.
You mentioned a decrease in the assault rate. Were you referencing
Within the facility.
Within the facility, and is that strictly juvenile, involving juvenile, or staff, or an all of the above?
All of the above. So we track when there are critical incidents where there's harm caused by a youth, which is oftentimes a youth attacking a staff person, or just a youth harming himself or another youth. And we have seen a real drop in that to an average of not more than 26 during the period that we've been there, which is down significantly, and we can share
What was
some of that data.
You may not have it at hand reach the period you're talking about with that decrease.
From August of 2018 until May of 2019.
So ahead of the pilot program, because of the changes that started being made, you'd already seen results of that. And you're just comparing it to the comparable period a year earlier?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I can, the trauma-informed care is one out of a number of initiatives. So that's not the only change that we're doing and make this a safer.
Deeper into what exactly that involves.
So population management for us is looking daily at our roster of young people and just making sure that young people are not detained longer than they should be because of slowdowns in the system. Whether it's, contacting attorneys, making friendly reminders that, hey, we have a young person back here, we need you to, file motions, take action. Oftentimes that there's a slowdown there because our youth are not afforded private attorneys, so they do rely on the public system and volunteer attorneys. So that could innately create some slowdowns in their representation and the things that need to be filed to keep them moving through the process. So just having an expediter, which our system is lack, we've taken on that role where we've actually hired a full-time expediter to pay attention to those details and to, for lack of a better way of saying it, rattle the cages to make sure that young people are moving and that the system efficiencies are not holding a kid, inefficiencies are not holding a kid back longer than they should be detained.
And another figure you may or may not have, as you mentioned, there is a decrease in time spent by juveniles at youth study centers. Do you know offhand how long they're staying on average now compared to then?
Okay, the number before was about, 42 days, and we have different populations of young people, so that could be a tricky number.
Yeah.
But on average, I think now our number is somewhere around 14 to 20 days. Don't quote me, I can get you.
Yeah, I'm happy to follow up.
Yeah, we'll compare this one back to you. But I also want to say, building off of Dr. Webster's point, that part of this is about coordinating the actors in the system, right? And so that's one of the major priorities of our work. It's figuring out how do we get the district attorney, the sheriff, the public defenders, all of these various actors to work together so that we can have improvements in the juvenile detention center population.
Chief Thomas, with this real focused effort now on reducing juvenile crime, we reported last week, 2 weeks ago, that a number of crimes involving juveniles like armed robberies, auto thefts were down from May 26th through June 8th. Do you know if those numbers have continued to drop?
With those violent crimes, the last staff meeting, and Chief Noel, that's in his shop, that he actually watched those numbers. But in our staff meeting, they continue to go down, not only with the juveniles, but the adult population as well. and we've seen a decrease in all those areas.
Some would argue that there are so many programs for kids, which is great, but some would also say that there's not enough for parents, enough effort to reach out to parents even before their kids may start to get into these crimes. Are there more efforts underway for mom, dad, whomever, a guardian, to have more control of their child before all of this happens?
Well, that's a great question, and I think this is actually a part of the beauty of the community policing model. 9 times out of 10, what's mostly happened is that when young people are on the street at an hour in an unsafe place where they should not be, police officers are intervening not as an arrestor, but as a part of that village that it takes to raise a child. And what's often happening is that police officers are driving young people back to their homes. They're establishing a relationship with that individual's parents. And so we hope that by, number one, building that trust, that's an experience that young person is going to remember. But number two, by building that relationship with that individual's parents, that we can continue to see improvements across the system. I mean, to date, no young person who has been a part of the curfew has been picked up again. Right? And so the point you make is valid, but it is a part of this community policing continuum to establish tighter community ties, because that, at the end of the day, is what's going to keep us all safe.
And then you just mentioned getting other parties on board, like the district attorney. I know we've talked to him several times, and he basically has said that this type of approach isn't enough to keep crime down when it comes to juvenile crime. How are you going to get the DA on board to agree with you all that this is what is needed to be done?
Well, look, I mean, the DA has been a part of these meetings. He's been at the table. He has given us his ideas. And I think ultimately he understands that in order for this to work, right, in order for us to see better outcomes as a city, we've all got to be working together. And so, look, the mayor is clear about enforcing the law, but she's also the social worker in chief. And she believes that we can prevent crime before it happens by making strategic investments in young people and by making sure that these systems are collaborating together to make sure we have better outcomes. And so I think he's going to be a part of it.
I have a question that really, I don't want to make these guys go crazy with microphones, but maybe Deputy Chief Thomas is best equipped to hear that. So there's the perception, accurate or not, that any youth who's out past curfew is up to no good. The reality could well be something different. So what I'm interested in learning is what type of feedback you're getting, or any of you are getting, when your officers make that face-to-face contact. I'm sure one of the first questions, well, what are you doing out here? What's the answer? Are these kids bored? Are they looking for something to do? Are they on the way to work? Are they heading into trouble that the officer kind of sees it's time to intervene?
First, let me say, we're not targeting any kids or as it relates to curfew because we believe they have ill will. Some kids are just out because they don't have responsible parents, or they leave the house for whatever reason. And we want to make sure that these kids are safe. So we're not going out and assuming or even looking for kids who are doing malicious acts. However, if we run across them, then we would deal with that. But our first intent is to actually get these kids off the street so they don't become victims of crime. So when we bring them to the parents are very gracious that we brought them back to them. And a lot of times the kids are just out hanging out with no ill will, but just out in the community. It's summertime, they stay up late, but there's no direct correlation to the few kids that we picked up for curfew and crime.
And that sort of sounds to go hand in hand with what you're saying. You're not having repeat offenders, but it sounds like many of these kids weren't up to anything bad in the first place.
That's correct.
With that in mind, does it get somewhat tougher, Joshua, for the mayor to maintain this curfew if there's not a real pattern of juvenile offenders brought in as a result of that enforcement?
Well, this isn't about juvenile offenders. It's about young people and their safety. I mean, at the end of the day, if a young person is out at an hour that doesn't quite make sense, that young person is at risk of being the victim of crime. And so, in order to prevent crime from happening to young people, this is an approach that the mayor has decided to take. And, you know, I think one of the second order benefits of this is that it's going to establish, we hope it's going to establish a more trusting relationship between police officers and between the communities that they serve. Because, you know, at the end of the day, our police officers can do more than arrest folks. They can be a part of that fabric. They can be that role model, that individual that has a personal relationship with young people and families. And this approach is a part of that thinking.
The summer obviously provides a lot more opportunity for there to be that interaction, positive and otherwise. What's the process for when kids are back in school to kind of maintain that level of connection, knowing that there may be fewer opportunities to have that type of interaction with juveniles?
Well, yeah.
So, the police department has implemented the PELS program, bringing PELS program back. We hope to have that program up and running in August, which would actually help with that, just what you said, the overlap from the summer. How do we continue to have community and community policing hand in hand, especially as it relates to our young people in our community? So the PELS program would offer that to our young people. It will be a program that is housed after school for a few hours, but they will interact with the police, not just our NOPD, but we have opened it up to all law enforcement officers in the metropolitan area that have a vested interest in working with juveniles to keep them off the streets and actually becoming thriving in our communities and showing them, hey, police are humans too. Police have families too. Police have children as well. So with that program being implemented in August, we're hoping to bridge that gap that we have not seen for quite some time as it relates to community policing. And Chief Thomas can also relate and chime in as well.
Forgive me for not knowing what PELS exactly is.
PELS is a police athletic activity league, and it is actually managed in part of most of your metropolitan police departments, and it's actually police officers intermingling with the young kids from canoeing to fishing, life skills, tutoring, sports, as you will, but sports will not be the main focus. It will be life skills and actually how do you interact with police when you are approached by police, and just having that police community engagement with our young people, and that's very important. As it starts from the little ages, so as you get older, you know exactly how to interact with the police if and when you do encounter police.
So this evidently was something we had in place previously and is being brought back?
Yeah, it's been...
In the 90s, we had the Police Athletic League, where the community and the police was actually coaches to them. Now, what I can tell you is that as a father, I have a young son that played ball, and I was actually a coach assisting the coaches. We have a lot of police officers now that have kids involved in sports. This is a more formal approach. Police Athletic League is very important to the mayor, to the city, as well as Chief Ferguson. So we want to bring it to another level. But we always had police officers that were involved in the kids' life that actually was coaching, teaching, mentoring, and doing a lot of other things with the young kids in the community. So we just want to broaden this and open it up to more kids and make it a more formal approach.
And I guess that speaks to where the overlap with UNC and the coordination take place.
That's correct.
Ms. Stevens, as the Criminal Justice Commissioner, can we get your thoughts on Ashley Crawford, the woman who worked in the Public Defender's Office, who represented hundreds of defendants? We don't know if any of them were juveniles or not, but obviously it came out yesterday that she is not a licensed attorney. Hundreds of cases could now be in jeopardy. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not going to comment, as that is as it relates to the public defenders, and because the district attorney is actually starting a formal investigation, but I will say that it is very disturbing. It is disturbing in the sense that we do not know how many cases she has represented or misrepresented in this facet, which means that those cases will now have to be revisited. So the short end, it's very disturbing. We will let the investigation take its course and then follow the lead of the district attorney.
Any other questions? All right, thank you guys.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
And just really quick, I know that there was a lot of mic shuffling